Imagine you're the supreme leader of the Soviet Union. You're thought to be all-powerful, but you have a secret. You are terrified of your own secret police, the KGB. They have recordings of you and your allies cheating on your wives with prostitutes, ordering coups, and committing felonies. You use the KGB to terrorize your enemies, but they have become too powerful. Except, plot twist, this isn't the Soviet Union. This is the United States of America. This is the crazy true story of J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, America's KGB. Hey guys, I'm Drew. This is a summary of Enemies, a history of the FBI, written by Pulitzer Prize-winning author Tim Weiner. If you want me to make more video book summaries like this, please subscribe. It's 1894. The Prime Minister of France is assassinated by an anarchist. Then, 3 years later, the Prime Minister of Spain is assassinated by an anarchist. Then, 1 year after that, the King of Italy is also murdered by an anarchist. And then, I am not making this up, 1 year after that, the US president is gunned down by an anarchist. It felt to many like civilization was falling apart, and this was the world the FBI was born in. You see, before the FBI, if you were the US president and you wanted to take down a criminal, you had to hire private detectives. As president, you mostly hired Pinkerton, the biggest detective agency. But Pinkerton keeps getting hired by the industrialists, and they always end up shooting too many of those pesky union workers. And well, they're making you look bad. But Teddy Roosevelt wanted to go after his enemies. So, he asked Congress for permission to make a secret investigative force that would answer only to him and not Congress. Congress was like, no way, dude. That sounds like you're trying to create a secret police. Those are not good for democracies. But Teddy Roosevelt ignored them and secretly siphoned money away from the Justice Department to create one anyway. So, it turns out the FBI has been doing mass surveillance for a very long time. The first one we know of began in World War I, when the FBI rounded up 1,500 radicals and threw them in jail, declaring them spies. Except, it turns out, not one of them was actually a spy. They were just anti-war activists, and their only crime was publicly speaking out against World War I. Back then, Americans were so freaked out about German spies, huge vigilante groups emerged to root them out. Like, huge groups. The biggest one had 300,000 members. They roamed the streets in posses, breaking into the houses of suspected radicals and beating them up. Again, this is happening in America. But of course, the FBI rounded these vigilantes up and threw them in jail, right? Nope. Actually, the FBI teamed up with them to break into union offices and homes and throw the union leaders into jail. So why were the union leaders jailed? Spying for the enemy, perhaps? Nope, just for being anti-war. Even the New York Times called them agents of Germany. Can you imagine the New York Times today encouraging the FBI to throw union activists into jail for being against the Iraq War, calling them agents of Iraq? Also, J. Edgar Hoover was the director of the FBI and really hated communists, so he arrested over 10,000 people he thought were communists. Except, later, we learned that most of these people weren't actually communists at all, or they had attended one meeting. Imagine the FBI breaking down your door and throwing you in jail because you attended a meeting. Again, it bears repeating. This isn't the Gestapo or KGB. This is the FBI. Remember, these so-called communists weren't political revolutionaries that were trying to overthrow the US government. They were like guys with union jobs who wanted crazy things like Sundays off. Hoover saw communists everywhere and wiretapped just about everyone. But he didn't stop at wiretapping. The FBI broke into homes and offices to plant bugs, and even wiretapped Supreme Court justices. That is not a thing you want your police doing in a democracy. It got so bad, the Attorney General said that the FBI was like the Gestapo. Hoover's boss was literally comparing him to the Nazis. Hoover went wild, wiretapping congressmen, senators, diplomats, and more. He even hired safecrackers and lockpickers to break into officials' offices. The FBI later became famous for their black bag jobs. Hundreds of FBI agents listened in on telephone conversations day and night. Was there any legal justification for this? Well, America was at war, and extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures, as they say. Except, America has been at war ever since. Truman, now president, hated Hoover, who was now so powerful, he just flat out ignored the president. his boss's boss. Yet Truman never fired him, or even criticized him publicly. Think about that. The President of the United States was so afraid of the head of his secret police, he couldn't even criticize him, much less fire him. It was a dangerous time for America's democracy. And what was Truman afraid of? We wouldn't find out until 30 years later. Hoover was so paranoid about the communists that in 1959, in New York alone, the FBI had over 400 agents investigating the communist threat, yet only 4 agents, were investigating the mob. And as the Cold War intensified, Hoover grew even more paranoid. Commies were everywhere. He was sure that the Soviets were behind the civil rights movement, and thus began Operation COINTELPRO, aka Operation Spy on all the people Hoover thinks are commies, including gay people, black people, union workers, and anybody who thought the Vietnam War was bad. Hoover even spied on Martin Luther King Jr. The FBI broke into his hotel rooms and bugged his conversations. They had recordings of parties that ended in the unmistakable sounds of sex. In other words, they caught a minister and the leader of the civil rights movement cheating on his wife. If these recordings got out, that would be bad. So, to put an end to this dangerous commie civil rights movement, America's defenders of the public safety sent an anonymous letter to MLK, telling him they would leak the recordings unless he killed himself. MLK said, then won the Nobel Peace Prize. That didn't stop Hoover. He was cartoonishly racist and didn't even pretend to hide it. When Bobby Kennedy, JFK's Attorney General and Hoover's boss, asked him to prosecute the KKK, Hoover ignored him. In fact, not only did he ignore him, but he actively tipped off the KKK and the local police about the Freedom Riders' locations. The Freedom Riders were civil rights activists fighting to end segregation in buses. So Hoover was actually helping the same guys that lynched little black kids and bombed churches full of black people. Then, LBJ became president, and like Hoover, he also hated communists, so they became besties. LBJ also hated the KKK though, and he asked Hoover to take him down, just like Bobby Kennedy did. Except, this time, Hoover actually did it. He used the same tactics he had used to infiltrate the communists, and he crushed them. Hoover's spies quickly penetrated every level of the KKK, and went wild accusing other Klan members of being snitches or double agents, and well, basically did everything they could to cause chaos. The FBI offered millions to any KKK members who would snitch, and it worked. The FBI learned the KKK had penetrated deep into local and state law enforcement, and they controlled vast swaths of the Deep South. The FBI bribed state police, who were also Klansmen, to plant bugs and wiretap their fellow Klansmen. These same agents carried out black bag jobs to steal membership lists and literally blew up Klan supplies with dynamite. Hoover's men found that in one Mississippi county, every single law enforcement official was part of the KKK. Every one. The FBI penetrated so deep that one agent reported there'd be a Klan meeting with 10 people there, and 6 of them would be reporting back to us the next day. It was one of the most successful intelligence operations of all time, and the KKK never recovered. It bears repeating that Hoover had the power to do this the entire time, but chose not to. Now, over the years, Hoover's wiretaps had recorded many prominent Republican congressmen having sex with prostitutes. If that information got out, it could guarantee the Democrats a win in the 1968 election. Hoover offered the dirt to his fellow commie-hating buddy, LBJ, but he wasn't running for office anymore. So LBJ offered it to Bobby Kennedy, who was running. But Bobby Kennedy was like, dude, what? I don't want to win that badly. That would completely destroy the public's confidence in the US government. Keep in mind, this was information Hoover was sharing on a whim with LBJ. Imagine what other dirt he probably had, and who he might have been blackmailing. So, as the Vietnam War protests heated up, Hoover was certain it was those damn commies again. He sent hundreds of FBI agents out to infiltrate pacifist movements across the country, and they used the same tricks they had used to sow discord inside the American Communist Party and the KKK. Although, hilariously, some of these agents liked their new lives as hippies so much, they left the FBI and never returned. Then, Hoover went after the Black Panther Party, because obviously black people were all commies too. His spies penetrated to the highest levels. And then Hoover went after gay people in the US government, because gay people were obviously all commies too. Then Hoover himself got hoovered when the world's ballsiest left-wing group pulled a black bag job on the FBI itself. They broke into an FBI office and stole over 800 documents. Hilariously, the FBI didn't even think to have a security system, because who the hell would be crazy enough to rob the FBI? The activists slowly leaked the FBI's documents to Congress. This is the reason why we know about COINTELPRO today. Congress was pissed and told Hoover to knock it off, or else. So he did, kinda. Hoover immediately ordered all wiretaps to cease, right before going in front of Congress. So he could say, "Oh, little old us, we aren't wiretapping anyone." Meanwhile, the Vietnam War was a disaster, and Nixon was desperate. Like past presidents, he pressured Hoover to get some sweet dirt on his enemies. But this time, Hoover, who was well practiced in ignoring orders from the so-called most powerful man in the world, was actually kind of worried about Congress, so he refused. Nixon and Hoover were no longer friends. "Fine," said Nixon, "I'll create my own secret police to spy on my enemies." And so he founded CREEP, the Committee to Re-elect the President. And yes, they actually referred to themselves as CREEP, which is hilarious. CREEP got caught breaking into the Watergate, and Nixon got impeached. So how did the press find out about Watergate? Turns out, the FBI was the one who leaked the story. The leaker, Deep Throat, was a top FBI official. This was the exact kind of thing past presidents worried about, and why they never wanted to piss off Hoover. But Hoover died a few years back. The new director was afraid the FBI might be shut down by Congress if it didn't clean up its act. So he began winding down COINTELPRO. They reassigned agents to focus on ordinary criminals. In 1976, the FBI raided itself and found a stash of 25 volumes of Hoover's secret files where he admitted to all these crimes. Congress decided that it was time to neuter the FBI. They sent FBI veterans to jail. The wiretapping stopped. For a while. A new FBI dark age set in. The FBI was so incompetent and overwhelmed that in 1992, an Al-Qaeda informant literally told the FBI that radical Muslims were planning to blow up the World Trade Center. But the FBI not only ignored him, they actually dropped him as an informant. They had 10 years of advance notice on 9/11. And not only did they have an informant, they had an actual diary of a radical Islamist that contained specific plans to blow up the World Trade Center. But they didn't even read the diary. It was sitting in a drawer for years because they only had one translator in the entire department that could speak Arabic. The FBI assigned hundreds of agents to investigate Bill Clinton's sex scandal, while only a couple were looking into Al-Qaeda. Think of how messed up that is. It gets worse. In 1998, the president received a briefing that Osama bin Laden planned to hijack 747s and fly them into the Twin Towers. Clinton's anti-terrorism head ordered all 56 FBI offices to investigate, but most of them ignored him. It's almost laughable. I mean, one FBI agent uncovered proof that the suspected terrorists were literally taking lessons to fly Boeing 747s. Imagine ignoring that piece of evidence. So, by now, we've seen how dangerous it is to let our secret police wiretap anyone they want. And this is why the Patriot Act is so controversial. It gave the FBI many of the same powers that they had in Hoover's time. But now, they don't even have to break into your house anymore. Snowden showed us how the FBI, NSA, and other agencies were reading our emails, listening to our phone calls, and even watching us on our webcams. Of course, we need to stop the bad guys. But today's secret police can sometimes become tomorrow's military junta. Hey guys, this is my 4th video ever, and it took me over a month to make. So if you'd like me to make more summaries like this, please subscribe. And check out the book Enemies in the description.